Hi, welcome to the show. It's a great time to be ensconced in Rebecca Hazell's wonderful living room with our books. It's that time of year, isn't it, Rebecca?
It is. Time to read.
That's right. So welcome to the show. We're going to introduce the award-winning author, Rebecca Hazell, to you, as well as a number of other characters in this week's Go Island, Cowichan Valley. On today's show, characters in Rebecca Hazell's many books. Someone you may recognize from a legendary performing palace. And stay tuned for a new road trip idea on Go Island, Cowichan Valley.
Go Island is brought to you by German Auto Import Network.
It is delightful to be here at the home of Rebecca Hazell. We're going to be talking about her work, her writing, her inspiration, her travels. We said she was an award winner, and surely she is. She's definitely won a number of awards, one of them the 1997 Notable New Book Award, affiliated with UNESCO. She started illustrating as a child, but she also became quite involved in creating science craft kits for kids, and she's a needlepoint artist of some note, once called the best in North America. Well, thank you for welcoming us into your home, Rebecca. It's great to see you.
Delighted to have you here.
Let's start way back when you were a child, and before we have you read from one of your most current books, talk about how a young writer becomes interested in putting forward all this imagination. It seemed like you were in love with fairy tales, and that was the beginning.
I was very much in love with them, and I had this aspiration for years to illustrate them, well, also to rewrite them and illustrate them, modernize them. And my best friend and I used to tell each other stories and illustrate them. And we had a whole fantasy world that we created together. So I think that was sort of the beginning. But, you have to write in school. And I loved it and found tremendous joy in it. And I was an avid reader. I think that's really important for young people to know. Read a lot. Yeah. And then just found those voices that spoke to me among authors and said, oh, that's how they do it. So then I used the inspiration from those books in the way that I chose to write.
Now, through the years, you've traveled to an awful lot of places. I know originally you're from Texas. You've been traveling through Canada. You were living in New York and California and Arkansas and Nova Scotia. Right, yeah. So at one point, counting it up, 70 moves in 50 years, that life experience must be great as well for writing.
Yes. It was kind of dislocating as well, but it made me feel as though I'm a citizen of the world.
Mm. And in researching your history, especially for the book The Grip of God, which you'll read from in Duncan and Victoria and on this show shortly, in researching that history, has that become a total passion for you as well? To understand history and translate it through your books?
Yes, I would say so. Right, yeah, I mean, this book only covers 1/3 of this young heroine's journey, which takes her across Eastern Europe, Near East, the Mediterranean, and France. And what a turbulent era it was. This is the 13th century we're talking about. And people thought quite differently then, but their hearts were the same. And that was what I found the most interesting is, we all have the same reactions to things, and they just express them differently then. So I think that's one of the best things about studying history is finding our connections rather than what sets us apart from each other.
How can you take something from the 13th century and bring modern understanding to it, if I could put it that way? I mean, how do you hope your audiences will receive it?
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful question to ask because so much history is actually, or historical fiction is actually written as though it's People magazine. And I find that really distressing because I think history is completely magical and amazing. And romance is fun, and when you put them together, you have a great story. And it turns out that because people have the same fundamental reactions to things, there's this tremendous bond with the past that we all share and that we're really influenced by as well. Things that happened a long time ago are still right here with us now, affecting us.
I'd love it if you'd share one of those anecdotes that talks about this magical connection you have for history as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, which one?
Yeah, there are a few, right?
Yeah, there were several. Right. Well, this is just a tiny thing. I put in a blue vial of rose water as a, sort of a kind of a symbolic of her remembering that there are other things besides total war. And then I saw that exact vial in a museum in Paris, like 2 or 3 years later.
It was like fate, it must have been for you.
Well,
that
it did
moment.
feel that way, and we would we went to Disney World, and there was this whole exhibition on traditional Mongol culture, and I just took notes,
Wow.
like, oh yeah, I'll put that in and that in and that in. Yeah, it was quite wonderful.
Rebecca, can you give us an overview, just a capsule comment on the grip of God? What's the story about?
The story is about a young princess of Kievan Rus, which is the forerunner of both Ukrainian and Russian history, who is captured by and enslaved by the Mongols and carried off, and she ends up having to follow the war camps as they invade Europe, and she has to fend off all sorts of awful, vile things that happen. She's basically sort of the victim of a prophecy about her that influences everybody around her. Her captor's family has all these deep rivalries and hatreds that come out because of this prophecy and haunt her. So she, she grows up. She has to grow up really fast. In that era, 12 years old was old enough to be married and raising a family. So she's, from our point of view, a child, and I think that's part of the interest of the story is we keep comparing our times with her times and saying, they thought that, and how could they, blah, blah, blah. But, basically her intelligence and her wit and her clear view of reality carry her through.
So she sounds like a great heroine to me.
I think so. People love her. They're cheering for her.
Rebecca will read soon in Victoria and in Duncan. We'll give you the details in the show. Perhaps you'd treat us to one of your favorite passages or couple.
I will. This is after she's been captured, and I have to skip around for sake of time. This is being carried back to the Mongol camps. For seemingly endless days, we crossed lands that grew ever more alien. Now and then heavy veils of snow shrouded the landscape, only to be shredded by the relentless wind. When the wind ripped the snow away, the soil looked sickly, as though it had fallen under some curse. The frozen grasses were stunted, too, as if Mother Earth refused to suckle them. Threat seemed to lurk everywhere. The bitter weather finally relented, and I awoke to an empty pre-dawn sky as hard and luminous as marble. While our captors performed their morning rituals, I clutched my one remaining icon on its cord. If only I could feel God's love again. But I could not remember what love felt like, to give or receive. Then the rising sun thrust her rays through a stand of frosty grass, outlining each blade in brilliance and casting long purple shadows across the snow. The moment's immovable beauty pierced my soul, and joy briefly lit my heart. In that moment I felt an answer. This world is alive and speaking to me always.
There's visual clarity for television, and thank you, Rebecca Hazell. Coming up, the dates that Rebecca will be reading in Duncan and in Victoria, and then we'll be back. More with Rebecca Hazell after we have a look at a great road trip that you can take, and we're going to tell you all the way through the fall and winter how you can get out on the road and have a great time. And we're also going to be visiting with a legendary character, and you may know him well. He's brought some wonderful entertainment here to the Cowichan Valley.